Hey, this is Mike from BulbBrain. I wanted to talk today about something that is near and dear to me, which is multicam editing. This has just been a lifesaver when doing some of my projects, and so I just thought I've noticed that a lot of video editing programs actually offer this, but specifically I want to talk about it with Premiere Pro. So let's check it out. Okay, so the main thing that you want to focus on when doing this multicam editing, there's like a bunch of things to really think about. Point is, anytime you do a video with multiple cameras, syncing them and getting them to edit between multiple cameras is really where you're going to find the biggest issues, right? And so what you want to do is sync them. So Premiere Pro, you have your 3 cameras. So I play drums. So I play drums, and over the weekend I had a show, and what I typically do, I set up a couple different cameras for the recording. There's always the wide front shot. I use this one as another front shot just because it gets a little tighter. I try and do one on the side. This was a new thing. There's one that I typically do up top just to get a little different angle of the full band, and then I just figured I might cam, just because, why not? I'm doing it, I may as well record the drums, and then worst case, it's easy enough to have me. So, since I'm not behind the cameras, and I'm just sort of letting them record, and I hope that no one takes them, I do use GoPros and stuff that's sort of, it's not my best work. Not my best looking stuff. Since you're using so many cameras, that ends up being like a pretty memory intensive thing. So I typically just do this in I just create a new project usually, just so it's the cleanest memory. One of the things with Premiere that I'll probably do a couple Premiere tip videos, but you want to delete your cache, your media cache. That's another good way to just free up memory. You want to make sure you have a bunch of memory on the drive that you're working on, so like your C drive or whatever your main computer drive is. So you set up your file, basic Premiere, new file, put it in your folder. All of my stuff is videos, or it's BulbBrain, and then each project is sort of segmented. So I know that Sons of Ra is my band, and I know that basically have a ton of Sons of Ra shows, and I do a couple videos or a couple cameras at each show, and so I just have a Sons of Ra folder, and then I just date it, year, month, date, and then SOR venue. So this would be 22, 11, 27 SOR Golden Dagger, because we just played at the Golden Dagger. Do that under music. Now, we did 2 sets, so the way I organize this, let's see, I do a lot of our practices, and then I do our live show, just so we can listen to the practice, and we're always learning new songs, so it's easy to like play back these practices. So live shows, Golden Dagger. Now we did 2 sets, so I knew there was the first set, the second set, and then miscellaneous B-roll. So first set, let's just do that. You can see I have the different cameras, the G7X Mark III, GoPro 6, GoPro 7, which are drums, and then the GoPro 9. Both sets are going to be in the file. I do them as set 1 and set 2, and keep them in the folders in the bin, because otherwise if I just drag the camera names into the bin, then it's going to be, if I just drag the camera names into the bin, then it's just going to have G7X, and there's going to be 2 of those. So this way I can just go to set 1 and go to set 2, and it just keeps it segmented for simplicity's sake. You import your files This is where some people will actually, they'll create the bins in there. I just create the folders in Windows Explorer, and then that is suffice for me to just copy it, and then everything stays in the folders, and so it's already organized. So while it's importing files, this is when I usually take out my phone, look at Reddit. So if you see set 1, set 2, set 1, set 2. So one of the things, so what I do, I close set 2, because then it's confusing. Now one of the things with this multicam in Premiere, I didn't record a separate audio. I am going to use just camera audio. So what you want to do, you typically would select your audio first and then whatever cameras. Now, the first camera you select is what are going to be the settings. So if you have 30 frames a second, and then you have 24 and you have 60, just be aware if you do the 60 frames a second first, that your timeline is then going to be in 60 frames a second. So that's why you just typically, you want to do your 30 or your 24 first. I just know this is my better camera. I'm not even going to talk about RAM, but I have found with Premiere, deleting the media cache and not having anything else open is the most effective way to use it. I don't want to get conspiratorial either, but I don't think you can shift select like just from the top, because then all these folders are going to be in here. Select all your files, right click. This is for Windows, I'm sorry. Mac, Apple people, I don't know what the right way is to do that. Create multi-camera source sequence. Okay, so the really confusing thing about doing this is that there's a sequence, there's the multicam sequence, and then there's the sequence from the multicam. So the first thing is you're basically setting up all these files into one timeline with the different cameras. Yeah, just with the different cameras. So you can, third track just started. You can see there's in points, out points, time codes, sound time code, and then just audio. And I just do audio because that's what I want. So we do 22 with the 1G. So hit OK. Then you pull up your social media again. This is where you're going to process all the audio. You're going to process all the clips. You can see right here it's 14 different clips that it's sort of processing the audio on. So grays? Where did I get white hair in my beard from? 1% done. So you see it's generating peak, post-processing, could not synchronize one or more clips. That happens a lot. So then what you do, you have your files, SOR Golden DAG 1, of course, there's always a red thing that pops up. But here you could look 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So I got the 4, so you see that it's the 4 cameras. Now, how it works is each clip, it'll sync perfectly, it'll be on a different track, right? And so that gets confusing because you'll see when you do the editing later that if it's on different tracks, like if you're used to cutting to one camera, then all of a sudden that goes black and then that camera goes on another track. So the first thing that I always do, this is easier for a 45-minute set, double check that it has that 0. Now, this is my call for, if anyone knows of an easier way to just zero those up, get them on the same track, I'm more than open. I'd love to hear it. Then you open the second timeline. Then you open the third timeline. Now, this is my call for, if anyone knows of an easier way to just zero those up, get them on the same track, I'm more than open. I'd love to hear it. Then you open the second timeline. Then you open the third timeline just so I can kind of gauge. So here's where you do the old school. You see that you started, it's MVI 3729, and then it's GHO 19865. So it's GHO 29865. So we know Golden DAG, so it is doing it in order. So what I do is I highlight these, bring in the Golden DAG 1, GHO, just bump them right up next to them. Now, those, I know GoPro splits their track, so once it gets like 10 minutes, or I think it's 10 minutes, it takes the same file name, and then it adds a 2 in the beginning, 2, 3, 4, 5. It adds different numbers at the beginning. So, see, so obviously we're at GXO, we're missing the 3. It's not perfect, but if you had to do this by hand. Okay, so here, so obviously something's going on. What I'm going to do is save. What you want to do is save. What I'm going to do, stop that recording. I'm going to close this file. Clearly something happened. I don't know what's going on. But this is important because you will always notice BS like this with your tracks. So it's important to understand. Troubleshooting is like the other main aspect of editing, because whatever platform you're going to use, maybe your files or something that's going to be weird. Ooh. So now those are showing up. I'm going to go to Edit, Preferences, Media Cache, Delete. So again, this is when you pull out your phone, you go on social media, you go on Reddit, or you pull out your audiobook and you just start listening. Just sit for a while. I've done music. So the main point is you want to get these files. This is where you need to see if someone, this is kind of, like, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's kind of easy because with the GoPro, you know that it just splits the file at the end of the file and it starts the next one. Where it's difficult is if you have like 3 or 4 different camera operators, and so in the camera because most cameras will stop either after 10 or 30 minutes, and so when that happens and then you start again, you know, like say one is going to continue the whole time, but this other, like another camera is going to have 3 to 5 seconds of black space, or just pausing where you stop and then it starts, syncing those cameras up to this is where you're going to have a lot of trouble. Not a lot of trouble, but just where you need to be more cognizant of like plopping in the next track. For me, I've done this enough, and I know that when I put the GoPro just slices the track, so that's how I know I could easily slide everything, butt them up against each other, and it's fine. When I do the G7X, and I do that, I'm going to have to resync that file. Usually, Premiere's waveforms, I'm struggling with those a little bit. You can see some of the, you can sort of see it there, where like there are some divots, and so when I'm going to pull the other one up, I'm going to make sure they all sync, and then we have a little bit of silence in between songs, so of course we wait, so you can use those silence, or use that silence to figure out where you are, and then resync. So this is why everyone does their clap at the beginning, because it's a sync clip, and so it's basically, if you're trying to sync all those, everyone's got their separate lavs, and so just getting someone's call for something to try and sync is usually difficult. So the computer has gotten really good at this audio syncing, and so I've just had a lot of good luck with just doing audio sync, and then all the clips are just lined up. The easiest thing I think would be to do the audio first, just because it'll align everything to what you have, and then hopefully it just works. Since it broke it up into 3 different clips, the way it did it, that was why there was only the 5 different layers, because if everything just had one clip and then it was on a different side, where it gets, if it didn't go into Golden DAG 1 or Nothing 1 and 2, each of those would have gotten their new respective track. So while it started at 4, we would have ended up at like 7 or 8 tracks. So this is just one of the things to keep in mind. So if you do notice that, is that everything syncs up perfectly, but it's wild like that, the first thing that I do, just for simplicity's sake, is when I open that, so you create your new source, you open that in the timeline, and you get everything as smashed as possible onto the same line, because when you're going through the multi-cams, it's easier to know like what angle to expect from which cam. So that's why you're going to do that. This Premiere masking. So funny. Masking. Yeah. What's masking? No, that's what we're doing. Oh, we're masking you in. Well, that's fun. Done it both ways. So sometimes when you just create the timeline and you have all 4 of yours, if you're just doing something small enough and sometimes I find it easy to just sort of like cut and move the things apart while you're looking at everything, or just like keyboard shortcuts. I don't know if it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but you can see there's the small angles in one side and then the actual main viewer in the other side. So you have the little thumbnails of like what the cameras look like, and then you have the main timeline of what your main camera selected is. I just close both of those. You have your main timeline right here. Let's see. So we see that so one of the set 2 files was actually one of the set 1, so I could have had a sync, but now as you see, there is the spot, because it doesn't automatically do it, and of course it's the one camera that doesn't always file immediately right after, so I do need to sync it manually. Stick hits are basically like a clap, so the stick clicks are basically the clap. Okay, so here, so it's generating the peak, which is gonna let me see these audio files, so that's why I did this. So this is like old school sync, right? So you basically do this. If you find that it's syncing too far, that actually worked. Sometimes if you zoom in enough, you can get it, but one of the other ways, you turn off this snap to timeline, and then that way you get like this, it like does seconds versus the other one that seems to do like 3 seconds. So then we listen. So that's how, in case you have like just a random file that didn't get synced, that's one of the ways you do it, just old school. There is a way, they do have like a right click, and then you can, there is like a sync audio, but it's like every time I do that, it doesn't. It like, it syncs it, but it does it like 30 seconds away from where I want. So if you can figure that out and it works,